easier to start with, but when you have to make that process repeatable, scaling technology is very, 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 very hard. You can talk to any seasoned CIO who has done any technology implementation, and they'll tell you that starting with technology is easy, scaling that is very hard.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be joining from. And this is our process series. We have 3 different series going on overall as part of our overall webinar portfolio. And in today's webinar, our goal is going to be talk about one of the ERP concepts or topics. For today, we have a very interesting topic, and this is the one that we get requested a lot from our customers. We want to improve our processes. We don't know how to start on that. So today we are going to give you some things that we utilize for our own internal processes. And if you are trying to improve business processes, hopefully this tool can help you in doing this in the DIY mode, if that's your preference, or you can work with somebody. But in general, what we are going to discuss today will help you in strategizing the project. If you're dialing for the first time, there are webinars and events. You can find them on our Elevate IQ page, which is events and webinar. And if you want to be notified about these events, you can also subscribe to our newsletter. We offer a lot of announcements there. On that note, we are going to start with everybody's intros. Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent technology advisory firm. We help our customers with any sort of technology strategy, change management, business process improvement, as well as technology selection. On that note, Shrestha, welcome. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Shrestha Das, and I'm working as an industry research analyst at Elevate IQ. And thank you, Sam, again for inviting me here today. Very excited for the webinar.
Yeah, anytime. And these topics are very exciting to partner with you. So thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to dig right into the topic. If you guys are ready, I'm going to share my screen. So just confirm whenever you can see it. From your perspective, I think you should be able to see it now.
Yeah,
okay.
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we are going to dig right into the first slide. So first thing, I guess, whenever you are looking for the business process improvement, one thing that you need to understand is the audits and why process audits matter. Why do you need to do that? Number one, obviously, you are trying to uncover some sort of undocumented workflows. Sometimes when we get into the customer engagements, people don't even know where to start. They may have versions of the business processes. They might not know everything. So the idea of process audit is to uncover some of those unsaid workflows that might be sitting in somebody's head or some spreadsheets that you may not be aware of. They could be outdated, undocumented, incomplete. Generally, that's the state most businesses are in. The second thing, why you want to do some sort of audit before you start with the process documentation. Some companies jump right into the documentation. So obviously it will help you in identifying efficiencies, bottlenecks, any sort of ownership gaps that you are going to have from the process ownership perspective. It's going to help you find all of that. But most importantly, I mean, process audits or process improvement could have 2 different flavors. And sometimes people sort of mix both of those. So sometimes what they do is they are going to feel that, you know what, obviously we want to do some sort of digital initiatives, but right now we are not ready. So what we are going to do is we are probably going to invest in some sort of physical process improvement. The challenge with physical process improvement is that it's not aligned with the digital taxonomy. In 90% of the cases, the people and the companies that are involved in physical process improvements, they don't necessarily understand the enterprise software constraints, how digital processes work. So sometimes you are going to have a lot of challenges. And when we get invited after they have done all of that, then sometimes what happens is we are going to ask them, you know what, whatever you have done is probably not going to work. So now let's start over. So that's probably going to be a waste of your time, money, if you are thinking that you are first going to invest in the process improvement and then later going to worry about any sort of digital changes, digital transformation initiatives. So the only thing we are trying to say here is that if you have digital initiatives in mind, then you might want to attack them in conjunction. If this is a pure play physical process that is never going to be handled by systems, then it's a different case. For example, you might have some sort of onboarding process or 5S process from the inventory perspective that does not necessarily touch any sort of systems or goes through the system centric processes, then it's okay to create physical processes around that. But anything and everything that is going to touch some sort of digital systems, and sometimes you might not know that because you may not have operated on those digital processes. So then you may have to rewire everything after going through all of those physical process improvement exercises. So just keep in mind that you might want to look at this or review this in conjunction, both of them. And sometimes if you go through the digital processes, they are able to separate the physical ones out. That's probably not going to be in the scope of digital initiatives, so deal it differently. Most of the digital consultants, they don't necessarily get involved in the physical initiatives. Physical ones are going to be really different. So just keep that in mind. Maybe attack them together as opposed to attacking the physical process ones first and then later worry about how you can implement through different systems. But if you don't do any sort of process audits, it's very rare that any digital transformation initiatives that you might have will be successful. So again, the foundation will be some sort of process audit where you are identifying those gaps, identifying inefficiencies, and figuring out a plan from that. What will reside inside systems? What will be physical with systems? Then that is obviously the second phase, but you have to start from the process audit. So let's talk about some of the benefits, and we have bucketed this under 5 Ps. So number one benefit that you have from the process audit perspective is obviously you are going to have productivity improvement. Now, it's very, 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 very hard sometimes with companies and people. If they are not willing to change, they will tell you that, you know what, I don't have any problems changing. But as soon as you start talking about change, it becomes very difficult. They will not be able to see how your productivity is going to be improved. And sometimes that's very, very, very hard to visualize these things. And the reason for that is because unless you have operated in a very efficient operating model, most people just don't get it. So again, if you are championing this, then what you need to mention to people is you probably need to think about this, that look, you just don't know what you don't know, and it's going to take some time for you to realize these productivity benefits. Obviously, we are going to talk about some of the time studies as well. Sometimes they will be real world, sometimes there are going to be gaps in that. So you have some tools available from the productivity perspective. But in general, if somebody has not lived in a very streamlined architecture, very streamlined process operating model, it's going to be really hard for them to understand where they are going to get the productivity. Once you have lived on the things that we are talking about a couple of times in your life, in your career, then it becomes easier. In your case, if you can hire those people, obviously that's the easiest part. But generally, they are very expensive. So not everybody has that kind of cushion to hire those people. So again, if you are an executive, then you probably need to understand that you might not know everything. So just be open minded there. And if you are championing, then try to go easy on people. If they are not willing to understand right away, give them some time to reflect on this, and hopefully they'll come along and understand how they are going to get some sort of benefits here. But if you are able to do that, then you are going to see substantial amount of profits. And we have done time studies in that. And sometimes even one simple click results into millions and millions of dollars in savings. Sometimes companies argue that, hey, I mean, that looks great on paper, but are you really going to do that? Sometimes they might not see these results. The reason for that is because we'll create the operating model, but people don't follow. So obviously there is the implementation process, adoption process. If you follow it properly, then you will see these benefits. If you're not able to follow, obviously you are not going to see anything. But you definitely get this from the process improvement. We have proven cases with our customers. But most importantly, especially for the digital transformation initiatives, the process improvements are extremely, extremely critical. If you are not able to change your business processes, if you are not willing to change, you are better off just not going through any sort of digital transformation initiatives or buying any sort of enterprise software. It doesn't matter how cool they appear or how compelling the pitch is. In most cases, you will probably struggle. And the reason for that is because these enterprise software categories, they are designed from very fixed constraints and very fixed assumptions. Obviously, they all are going to argue that they are very flexible, moldable. You can change them the way you like, but even with that, you are going to have substantial amount of constraints, and those all constraints lead to substantial overhead, substantial over engineering, as well as sometimes increased licensed fee. So again, if you can solve this problem from the process perspective, that is always the easiest. If you are not able to find, you have to find some sort of middle ground. But generally, you need to change your business processes. Otherwise, you are going to have fun with these implementations. Scalability. Now, if you look at the real scalability from the financial as well as operational organizational modeling perspective, if you are going to have any sort of friction in the process, or if you are going to have any sort of custom components in the process, your processes will not be scalable. I don't care how unique your business model and business processes you have. If you want to scale them, if you want to make them repeatable, you have to standardize. You have to standardize the experience as well. Yes, everybody wants to offer unique experience, but unique experience is also very expensive. So if customers are willing to pay for that experience, that's a different deal. In general, unique experiences are very hard to scale. The more standardized experience you are going to have, you can give them a flavor of unique experiences. But generally, any unique product, unique services, they are very, very, very hard to scale, very hard to make it repeatable. And again, I have millions and millions of stories from the custom business model perspective, whether you are talking about custom clothing, custom food, custom experiences. Generally, those businesses struggle in the long run unless they have some sort of pipeline they have figured out. Maybe they are able to provide that experience, but in the background, they have some sort of repeatable, pipeline where they are able to produce that kind of experience through their process initiatives. But you want to have repeatability, you want to have scalability in the process, and those are the benefits of the process improvement initiatives that we are talking about today. But the best benefit that you are going to get in overall your partnerships. And when we talk about partnerships, we are not necessarily talking about partners. The partnerships could be with your internal, external stakeholders. It could be employee, customer, suppliers. They all are not going to retain as much knowledge. They are not going to have as much friction, and the way they are going to operate, it's going to feel as if there is no friction overall in operating with your company. So overall experience is going to improve. That may not be as unique, but you are going to get far more enjoyable experience through these initiatives. So again, if you have any sort of process frictions, it doesn't matter what kind of frictions you have. Anytime it feels like friction with your process, that means those are real barriers for your growth. Okay. So now some of the common misunderstandings, and we come across this a lot. Everybody tries to argue, about these things. By the way, guys, if you're in the audience, if you have any sort of experiences, comments, we always like to cover them during the show. So please, comment them. Going back to the misunderstandings. So some of the misunderstandings that we have, and by the way, if you guys have come across any sort of misunderstandings, please let us know. So we are the best. Okay. And Srasta, I'm pretty sure you probably recall this one. And sometimes this is funny as well, right? Because every single sales call that we go to, everybody is saying, we are the best. We have zero problem. We are 85% happy. We don't need any change.
Yeah. We have
Right?
heard that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And in 90% of those cases, we know that how inefficient those businesses are. They might claim that they are happy, but they are going to have a lot of moving pieces. They are working very hard. They are not streamlined overall from the operations perspective. So again, this is the very, very, very common understanding. The second common understanding is, or misunderstanding, is changes won't work for us. We have tried this before. It's not going to work. And even if we try with our team, people are not going to follow this. And again, the problem with the initiatives is that sometimes you have not involved in the process. You have not communicated the 5 whys of why you are doing that. You have not communicated your overall objectives, what you are trying to accomplish. And if you don't do that, obviously you are going to get a lot of resistance. Sometimes people cut corners and they see process improvement. Hey, I'm investing $10,000 in this particular improvement. Hopefully, I'm going to get something out of it. Generally, process improvement are very, very, very long-term, continuous improvement initiatives. So the more you are going to watch, the more you are going to measure, the more you are going to coach them. And again, coaching is not going to be overnight in general, right? So if you follow the process, then changes will work for us. Otherwise, you are going to have this claim that changes, they don't work in our organization. We just cannot afford to change that. Okay. The biggest misunderstanding, biggest, I cannot emphasize enough. Even today, and it's just shocking when we have heard like millions and millions of ERP failure stories or any sort of technology failure stories. They are everywhere. Whether you talk about AI, ERP, CRM, it doesn't matter which enterprise software you are talking about. And people feel that technology is some sort of magic wand and, some sort of Play-Doh, and they can shape in any form they like. Now, if you really go back to the fundamentals of engineering, and software was always meant to be engineering. And when you look at business processes, they are also designed using some of the engineering constraints. If you ignore those, you are going to have a lot of fun. 90% of the software systems and digital processes, they need to comply with those constraints. If you, again, so technology will only work when you have changed your business processes, made them compliant to enterprise software taxonomy and enterprise software dictionary. If you feel that technology is going to work for you the way you want, that's where you go get into these custom development scenarios, over engineering, over implementation, technology failures, over operational disruptions. So all of those scenarios are going to be in play when you feel that you can make technology work. Technical teams can figure it out. We don't have to change our business for that. Now, again, this is also very common. Sometimes it is we are the best, but we are so unique. Okay. Again, 90% of the cases, when we get into any sort of engagement, everybody's claiming that they are so unique. Their business processes are so unique, and they'll argue whole day why they are unique. Obviously, we are going to argue that, there is nothing unique about this. And the only thing that is unique here is your mindset. You are not willing to change. That's okay. It is what it is. But the more unique elements you are going to have in your business processes, it's going to be really hard to standardize that. So make sure you are paying attention to these unique elements. They are your biggest growth barrier. Even they might help from the customer experience a little bit. But again, unique is not good. Unique is bad from the operational alignment perspective, from the operational improvement perspective. The less unique you have, better your business model is going to be, the more streamlined business model will be. Another big misunderstanding, because this is what they teach in business schools, especially when you talk about methodologies such as your lean, any sort of physical process mapping methodologies that you have. They all focus on value streams. Value streams are great, but technical streams are slightly different than your physical streams. Physical processes you can model the way you like. There are no constraints, because again, those are physical processes. But when you look at digital processes, you have to comply with digital constraints. And 90% of the lean frameworks that you have in the market, they were not designed from the lenses of your digital processes. So just because you are able to figure out something from value stream perspective, and we get this argument from the customer, hey, we have designed these processes, we have spent a year with this process documentation, order to cash is done, procure to pay is almost done, and we want you to inherit that and implement the system from this. Now, the problem with that approach, you might have done order to cash, but if you have not considered the operational constraints, the technical constraints as part of those processes, then your process is just a thin slice. That's not going to work with the system. So we have to rewire that, accommodating the technical constraints. So again, just focusing purely on the value streams is probably not going to work. So focus on both. It's going to be your horizontal slices plus your vertical slices. And vertical slices is where the major play is from the digital processes perspective. You cannot afford to ignore them. They go hand in hand for system implementations for digital processes. Okay. Now, generally, the challenges associated with the business processes. So overall, when you work with these engagements, sometimes the decisions that you are going to make, they are going to be very cross-functional. They are going to have wide-ranging impact for pretty much everybody. Sometimes CEOs are going to be involved. And obviously, the higher up you go, they are going to have very limited attention span, and sometimes they decide from their gut, and those decisions fire back. So these are real challenges, and that's why you need to go a little slower when you are going to do any sort of process improvement. You need to follow the process. You need to have this process structured. If you don't have that, then you will run into challenges. But these are real challenges that we encounter in our engagements as well. The second thing, most people struggle with this. This is the mechanical mindset. Okay. If you ask anybody, even our own resources, our own employees, when we work with them, for them, it's much easier to look at the software, to play with software, just because playing with software is a lot more fun. So we call this as mechanical mindset. Okay. Generally, most people are really good at that. People are not necessarily good at theoretical concepts. and the process improvement, they reside in theory first. If you are not able to see that, then you are going to sign a contract, then you are going to play, and you are going to run into all of the issues that you might be familiar with from the ERP software implementation perspective. So don't have that mechanical mindset. This is a big challenge with process improvement initiative. Okay, so we have a comment here from the audience. So the comment is, a process once designed is based on the physical process, as you say, but why would you tell a client to change their process because the technology cannot enable it? Why not find different technology, etc.? Look, the argument that you are making is that, okay, I'm not going to change my business process, and I'm going to find one of the technology that is hopefully going to be aligned with the way I think or the way I have structured my business and business processes. 90% of the credible companies that we have in the market, the credible software vendors, they have followed accounting, supply chain fundamentals, commerce fundamentals, the way commerce transactions are supposed to be structured. They are designed more from the scalability perspective. You go in slightly non-stream software, they take shortcut and they are trying to align with the smaller businesses a lot more. And that's why we find that they have a lot more process issues in general. So it doesn't matter which technology you are using, they are going to have its own constraints, because when you get into at the software hardware level, everywhere you are going to have constraints. Sometimes these guys are trying to simplify that, okay, you don't have to worry about all of those constraints, but every single engineering system in the world, it doesn't matter whether it is hardware or software, they are designed from some constraints in the mind. If you don't respect or appreciate those constraints, you are going to run into issues. So again, changing that your business processes is far easier than changing the technology. You can probably find technology, but in 90% of the cases, when we look at these scenarios, the problem is with the processes. Problem is not necessarily with the technology or technology vendors. So again, you need to focus on your processes. The more you change, the better life you are going to have, from the operational improvement, from the financial efficiency, operational efficiency perspective. If you care for that, you might not be able to understand in the short term, but in the long run, once you have lived on these processes, you would understand how efficient your planning get overall. Once you align your processes to enterprise software dictionary, your M&A is going to be far easier. Accommodating new business models is going to be far easier. Implementing newer transactions is going to be far easier. The only thing you have to do is you have to learn the enterprise software dictionary. As long as you align with that, you should be okay. Hopefully that answers your question. I know that some people are going to feel that no, technology should be moldable. But again, technology does not work that way. And if you don't have that understanding, then obviously, I mean, that's where 90% of the companies struggle with technology implementations. Hopefully that answers your question. If you want to, if you have more follow-up comments, happy to answer those. Okay, I'm trying to go back here. Okay. All right. So again, 90 and these companies are also going to have limited experience scaling, and sometimes there are debates around what is scalability. So again, scalability is going to be in removing the friction that I was talking about, streamlining your business processes, dividing them in smaller chunks, making them reusable, repeatable as much as possible. The more you are going to have layered architecture for your business processes, the easier it is going to get. Easier it is going to be from the implementation perspective, but also from the adoption perspective. Okay. Okay, if you guys have any other questions, comments, I can take that. Okay. Limited formal training. Again, the smaller the business, the less formal training they are going to have. So formal training, when I talk about, this is going to be real degree in accounting, supply chain, information systems. If you have that education, these things will be easier for you to understand why these things matter. But 90% of the entrepreneurs, the people who are going to own these smaller companies, they just don't have that training. They don't have experience. So that's why they generally struggle with this. Now, there is also a bias with the homegrown algorithms. So again, creating technology is very easy. Anybody can do that. You can figure out these formulas, in your Excel sheet, in Access databases. You might have some other technologies, maybe some programming languages, maybe low code, no code tool. Okay, you can do all of that. But the challenge becomes once you start scaling that, when you are going to have newer scenarios, newer business models, newer transactions. Okay, so you are operating with a very limited sample size, limited perspective. That's why it looks easier to start with, but when you have to make that process repeatable, scaling technology is very, 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 very hard. You can talk to any seasoned CIO who has done any technology implementation, and they'll tell you that starting with technology is easy, scaling that is very hard. That's why we are talking about go back to fundamentals, follow the concepts, don't ignore them. If you ignore them, then you will run into challenges. But there is a substantial bias, especially if you have not worked on scalable processes, scalable systems. There is going to be substantial bias towards your own algorithm, and those algorithms are designed based on the workarounds that you have in your processes, and then that is going to drive pretty much everything, and then you are going to run into challenges. So pay attention to that. Now, lack of cross-functional alignment as well. And when we talk about scalability, we are also talking about cross-functional alignment. This is also very common that, okay, maybe marketing has figured something out, or maybe operations has figured something out, or maybe finance, supply chain. It doesn't matter which department we are talking about. When just one person is dealing with this, maybe you have just one planner or one controller, and they have structured everything the way their heads work. Great, but then you are going to have some sort of downstream implications, because you may understand finance, you may understand supply chain, but you may not understand what is happening in other departments. Sometimes they might inherit everything as is because they might not have as much power control, I guess, on the process. So they might not speak up, or they might not say, but then you are going to have a lot of issues because they are trying to work around the constraints, and you are not going to have as much cross-functional alignment. The processes that we are talking about, and even every single enterprise software vendors, they also talk about this. The more alignment you are going to have cross-functionally based on processes, the easier it is going to be. So this is also a challenge generally when you are going to have very fragmented, siloed processes. Inconsistent process and data taxonomies. Again, this is very common. And the example of this would be that, okay, you are using a word called project or term called project, but structurally, the project in your head may be very different from the project the way Salesforce may have implemented, or the way SAP may have implemented. Okay, so the more you are going to align the taxonomy from the process perspective as well as from data perspective, that's where you are going to find efficiency. But this is a major challenge from the business process perspective. ROI of intangibles. Whenever you are going to do any sort of consulting engagements, and you are going to ask, okay, what do I get out of it? Okay, you are going to get some sort of deck. I don't know how I'm going to utilize this. You are probably going to invest $100,000 on these initiatives, but what do you get out of it? Okay, so this is a major, major challenge for every single company. But again, if you don't do it, then you are going to run into challenges. So in general, people are not comfortable with the intangibles. Okay, and just the discomfort, and this is probably ties up with the mechanical mindset that I was talking about. It's a very, very, very common challenge, and that's why these initiatives are so hard. Okay, now the difference between physical and digital processes, I have already touched on some of them. So when you look at the physical processes, they are very easy. Generally, you are enforcing control manually. Your governance is very manual. You may have documentation. Sometimes people complain that, we are doing everything on Teams, Slack, whatever. We have to tell this guy because he doesn't get it or she doesn't get it. It doesn't matter who this person is, but there is a lot of finger pointing in general with respect to physical processes because you have to enable these control manually. Generally, the importance or scope of digital processes is that these controls are going to be embedded, encoded as part of your business processes. So you don't have to talk, you don't have to collaborate. That's the intent of the process improvement. But physical processes, generally, they are enforced manually. I'm just going to take a sip here. Thank you so much. So now here, more on the physical processes, generally they are designed towards very thin slices, horizontal value streams. They ignore the vertical aspect of these business processes, and that's where they are not necessarily compliant with the digital processes, digital systems. They are never one-to-one with digital systems. Okay, so you have to make changes if you want to implement any sort of digital processes. If you plan to operate your business completely manually or with systems that are designed for fragmented processes without any sort of data integrity, then it's a different case. You can operate on a spreadsheet. You are not going to run into any issues. But if you want to implement any sort of systems, especially the ones that are known for process integration, then you have to make changes. So this is what is about physical processes. Now, flexible meaning process integrity issues, data integrity issues. That's how physical processes work. So if you have all of that, that means you probably have those issues. Generally, they are not as structured. They are probably unstructured, and they are going to have uncoded data set. Technology processes, technical processes, digital processes, they require you to encode your data sets as well as processes. If you don't have that, that means you have physical processes, but you don't have digitally compliant processes. Okay, and not software taxonomy compliant. And when we are talking about software here, we are not talking about desktop software or user software. These are enterprise software designed to accommodate business processes, not just for one person. It's going to be probably for entire team, department, etc. And again, when you have tribal knowledge that is sitting either in somebody's head or spreadsheets, that means you are not going to have as much leverage, either whether you are owner, executive, whoever you are. If you want to retain that leverage, then you have to encode this tribal knowledge as part of your digital processes. If you are not going to do that, you are not going to have much control on your business model, on your function. So again, physical processes meaning tribal knowledge, and that means lower leverage overall for you. In terms of negotiation, whether you are talking about negotiation with customers, vendors, or employees. Digital processes, they enforce control from the digital process perspective. You have both of the value streams, which is going to be your horizontal plus vertical. The physical processes ignore vertical value stream. They only focus on the horizontal value streams. Coded and structured master data, you need to have that. Again, that's given for any technical processes. If you are not able to do that, there may be workaround shortcuts. You can take that, but then that is going to lead to some sort of over engineering, and that fires back in general. And then generally, when you implement these system constraints, there is going to be some overhead. So you need to keep that in mind. Sometimes that overhead might feel as if you are overcomplicating your business, but you are overcomplicating to oversimplify it. That's probably the best way to put it. You have to incorporate these dependencies, these constraints to enable digital processes. Initially, it's going to have a little bit of a lift, but once you understand what those dependencies are, once you implement them, then in the long run, you are going to get a lot more benefits. Okay. Data entry in general requires a lot more discipline. The data entry is far harder compared to your physical processes, because your physical processes, they are not necessarily connected. Here, hopefully, your processes will be connected. So again, you are not retaining as much tribal knowledge. You don't have to connect every data set every single time when you want to draw meaning from it. So overall, your data entry itself is going to be far more connected. When you enter data, it's going to check for every single constraint that you are going to have in the process, so that you are going to be analysis ready for the most part, meaning your data sets are going to be correlated. You are not going to have as much issues from the data and process perspective. So that's the intent. And software taxonomy alignment, I think we have already spoken about that. The way you have it structured right now, you have structured based on your understanding, the way you operate. The more you are going to align, the more efficiencies you are going to find. Another difference is, again, encoded knowledge. When you are going to have encoded knowledge, hopefully you don't have to retain as much knowledge or tribal knowledge in people's head or a spreadsheet. The more you do that, the more leverage you are going to get on your function, on your team. So even if you lose, let's say, one employee, one customer, one vendor, then that's probably not going to be as problematic, I guess. So you are going to get a lot more leverage, on your business model, on your function, whatever your role might be. But when you have this, then in general, your processes will be far more efficient. Okay, so where to find process improvement opportunity? I think this is what you were waiting for. Okay, where do you find this? Okay, so in our engagements, whenever we are dealing with our customers, some of the things that we notice, okay, when you have fragmented inventory, and we have had debates about this as well, when we deal with our customers and they are like, no, our inventory is okay, there's no problem at all. When you show them, okay, this is how the real inventory looks like, and they are going to say, what's the difference? They both are same. So this is where the major problem is. When you don't understand how the connected state looks overall from the process and data alignment perspective. Generally here, when you talk about connected data set, meaning you don't have multiple data stores underneath. If you have multiple data stores underneath, they are not connected with the same ID or same data set. That means you don't have the connected state of your transactional data. And if you don't have that, most likely your processes are going to be fragmented. So when you talk about fragmented inventory, you might have custom system one. Custom system one may be storing the definition of costing. Custom system two, that may be storing the state of, I don't know, maybe warehouse locations or whatever. Custom system three may be storing, if you have 6 or 7 different layers, one could be financial, one could be supply chain, procurement. Connected and cross-functional connectivity means all of this data set is going to be combined using one data set, and each of these data sets are not going to live in a separate data store where you are simply looking up based on some sort of ID. Again, the connectivity is slightly deeper, I would say, from the technology perspective. So if you don't have that, if you have fragmented inventory, that means you have some scope for process improvement. You're planning from the inventory perspective. If you are inventory organization, you can never be as confident if you are going to have fragmented inventory state. Your costing is going to be all over the place. You can never be confident on your financial numbers if you have this. Okay, so this is one area to look for when you have any sort of, if you want to identify, okay, where do you have process improvement opportunities? This is probably going to be the biggest red flag. Now, if you have any sort of intelligence built as part of part numbers, okay, and you might be doing some sort of workflow collaboration based on whatever warehouse identification that you have, or maybe you have coded the product categories as part of your part number. So whatever intelligence you have baked as part of part number, if you have those, that means you have some process improvement opportunity. If you don't have any part numbers, there are cases where you don't want to design part numbers, but those are different. Okay, so if you have that, then that's probably going to be an area where you might want to zoom in a little bit. Why do you not have that? And that could result into a process improvement opportunity. Any sort of manual production workarounds that you might be doing at this point of time, if you are doing any sort of manufacturing, if you're doing manufacturing planning, even if you're not doing manufacturing, let's say if you're doing just some sort of tech production, software production, even for that, if you are doing any manual workarounds after you have your plan developed and you are not able to operate based on your plan, that means you may have some process improvement opportunities as well. If you have any sort of custom estimation and pricing methods, in 90% of the cases, customers are probably going to have this. 90% of the companies have very, very, very custom, estimation logic as well as pricing methods. It's okay to have that, but you need to analyze if you're doing more than just the estimation, and if that estimation can be aligned with the enterprise software dictionary a little bit. If you can do that, obviously your processes will be far more scalable. But if you retain all of these unique elements, the more you are going to have, the more problems you are going to find, the more challenges you'll have from the process improvement perspective. So that could be another area where you might want to look at. If you have any sort of overlapping source of authority. So when you look at source of authority, meaning each of the data set, even if you have, let's say, for example, customer or vendor or item or project, if the state of that is residing in different systems, different databases, but still you need to have some sort of source of authority. Sometimes people claim that they have source of authority, but it's all over the place. Okay, so if you have overlapping source of authority, that means you have some downstream issues. You may have substantial opportunities for process improvement. If you're doing any sort of duplicate data entry, wherever you are doing, that is generally a big, big, big process issue. So keep an eye on that. Where exactly are you doing duplicate data entry, and why do you have to do that? Sometimes companies argue that they are doing that because that's how they have their business processes. That's how they were designed. They have always done it. But if you're doing that, there are generally, in our experience, substantial process improvement opportunity. This is also very common, especially with customers that have very legacy or outdated system. If they have any sort of delayed posting, if your operational state and financial state is completely disconnected, disjointed, then you are going to have some process improvement opportunity. This is probably area, again, we are not saying that you can never have operations disconnected from financials. In some business models that does make sense, but if you have that, you are probably going to have issues from the process perspective. So you might want to think about that a little bit. If you have any sort of issues with your ERP data, if you have that, that means you have some sort of process improvement opportunity. So analyze each of the cases. Why do you have the issues with ERP data, and what is happening with each of the data set? If you have anything inaccurate, you need to go deeper into algorithm. Is it because of how the data is being captured, or how data is communicated from process step 1 to 2? If you have any sort of misalignment there, that means you have some sort of process improvement opportunity. If you have correlation overhead, okay, your data sets are fragmented, you are trying to get all of this data, your executives are saying, give me this insight, give me that insight, give me this scenario, you are not allowed to take 3 days, give me this in 1 day. If you have all of that, that means you have to work a lot to be able to build these correlation. Maybe you are doing an FP&A system, maybe you are doing an SNOP spreadsheet, whatever, but if you have substantial correlation overhead, that means you may have some process improvement opportunities. Okay, so this is the framework, and this is whether you want to call this EPV PPAT or EPV GPAT, however you want to word it. But generally, you are going to have different levels of process improvement. So if you start at the department level, which is great, but if you don't have that cohesive vision from the enterprise perspective, generally you will struggle with these initiatives. Okay, so you want to start from the enterprise perspective. So enterprise perspective, the initiatives, the examples of the initiatives at the enterprise level could be that, okay, you have some sort of budgeting challenges, or you have some sort of recruiting strategy challenges. It doesn't matter what those challenges are, but these are overarching business problems that may span across departments, across system categories, across functions. So these are broader categories at the enterprise level. Once you have identified that, Then there are going to be next steps in how you want to zoom in, but at the overarching level, at the portfolio planning level, you want to identify all of that. So that's going to be your enterprise level. Generally that supports any sort of portfolio prioritization. This is probably going to be 200,000 foot overview that you are trying to analyze at the organization level. And this is going to help you from the program management, budgeting, how you want to run the parallel streams. It can help you identify all of that. But if you don't do this exercise, or if you don't analyze at this level, then again, you are taking very siloed approach, and that siloed approach is probably going to have some sort of downstream issues or not as much cross functional alignment. So the whole idea of process audit is, you analyze at the MVP level, at the enterprise level, and you come up with some sort of roadmap, some sort of streams that you want to attack, but make sure you have very integrated strategy for all of those initiatives, and you have some ways of isolating them. If you don't have that, then you are probably going to run into challenges. So again, here what you figure out is some sort of cross-functional coordination, enterprise priorities, etc. So that's from the enterprise level perspective. Now the next one that you have is the project level. Okay, and these projects are going to be the specific initiatives that you are taking. This is the subset of that enterprise. So let's say if you had the budgeting challenge, that the overarching problem that you are trying to solve, you have created some sort of budget for that. Okay, this is what you want to solve. Now, how do we go deeper into that? If you try to go deeper from day one itself, then you are probably going to run into challenges. So at the project level, you are picking one strategy at this point of time based on your portfolio planning, and then you are digging deeper into that. Okay, today I want to solve budgeting challenges, and we want to see how many different system categories are impacted, how many different departments are impacted, and you are going to analyze based on that. Obviously, you need to analyze this from the recruiting strategy lenses as well, because whatever changes you are going to make from recruitment strategy, they may have implication on your budgeting challenges. So the enterprise level is going to be some sort of guidepost that you have created, and that you are going to use as a compass to dig deeper into the project level. You might come back and revise your constraints that you had identified at the enterprise level, but project level is going to be a deeper dive in a very specific area that you are trying to analyze, and these are going to be some sort of improvement paths aligned with the project objectives. This is going to be a specific business problem that you are trying to solve, or the transformation goal. Then we keep peeling the onion here, and we go deeper. So here the next is going to be some sort of end-to-end value stream. And when you look at value stream, this is going to be the overarching value stream from the business perspective. We are not talking about technology here, we are talking business. So the end-to-end stream could be whether you are going from order to cash, procure to pay, plan to produce, record to report, whatever it could be. Okay, again, these are not the value streams from the lean perspective, the way lean likes to think. These are broader business streams aligned with the project objectives. You are analyzing all of that given technical constraints in mind. Don't forget technical constraints. They are as meaningful, as important. Your as a state that you have, including your current systems, whatever, whether you want to retain them, replace them, whatever you want to do with those systems, you have to keep all of this in mind when you look at this at the value stream level. And then again, here we are talking about higher level operational areas of the business. You are not deeper into technology. This is still at the value stream level. Then you go deeper. Okay, so now you are going to be at the process group level. And again, when you look at this enterprise level, you might be able to do probably in 30 days, maybe 60 days sometimes, depending upon how much time you want to invest. So sometimes you are going to ask, okay, how much time does it take? Okay, you are not going to get everything. You are going to write RFPs. Hey, I'm looking for everything. The vendor is going to say, okay, I can do it in 90 days. But generally, when they say I can do it in 90 days, what they mean is they can probably do this. Okay, so, and if you try to do all of this in one go, you'll probably run into challenges. That's why you want to take very MVP approach from the top down, and you want to analyze one step at a time. That's probably the right one. And sometimes you don't have to invest as much time in every single process area or detail if you just don't have as much learning there. It's not as meaningful from whatever goals that you have set for yourself. For example, technology implementation. There are certain things that you have to analyze from the technology implementation perspective, but you don't have to map every single flow and chart. And sometimes we see companies, they have spent years in doing process documentation, and they come to us and they give us that, okay, these are the processes, and we are like, hello, we cannot even read these. We don't even understand what those are. So so again, you don't want to go too deeper into that, because you want some sort of high level map, so that people can understand what they are operating with, and if they require any sort of details, then you dig deeper into that. So at the process group level, you are looking at some sort of managed customer relationship, would be a logical process group. Manage orders, fulfill orders, invoice customers. So you are going to be at that level. You are still looking at some sort of ownership governance for the major business process segments. And then you are dividing the overarching value streams that you have into the functional process domains. Okay. So that now we go deeper. That's going to be at the process level. This was the process group, and now you need to go deeper. And again, now we are getting into the real transactions. So the transactions are going to be, you are performing one activity, which could be create sales order, schedule production, allocate inventory. If you are going to be project service centric organization, then you are still going to have some sort of create code, sales order, uh, schedule resources, projects, whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever business model you have, you are going to have similar transaction. So here you are looking at those specific activities. These are still not as detailed. We'll go deeper into the next step, but here you are dealing at the process level. Here you are looking at a very specific business focused action aligned with the functional process domain. And then focus is going to be complete operational process within a process group. So you are one level deeper into process group. When you are dealing at the process group level, you don't want to worry about process, because you won't be able to think. But once you have defined the process groups, it's going to be much easier to tie back to the process group, and process group hopefully tie back to your value stream, and value stream to your project, to your enterprise. So that's how connectivity works. Then you get into at the activity level. Activity are going to be even detailed transaction, which is going to be, okay, you are validating. Okay, how are you validating? What are the steps that you are taking to validate that? So these are going to be very specific transactions, but these are branches inside your process. So validate, check, confirm, some sort of actions that you are taking, but those actions are far more detailed than the overarching actions that you are taking at the process level. So again, you are breaking them down further. Again, don't try to do everything from day one. If you start at the activity and task level, you are going to be so confused, it will not make sense. So start at the enterprise level and go deeper into that. Then finally, the task. These are the tasks that are going to be performed by the system, whatever you are trying to automate, or they could be manual as well. So whatever you might be trying to accomplish, these are going to be the specific tasks. It could be enter order in ERP, enter order in CRM, select some sort of warehouse location, print shipping labels, allocate resources, plan resources from the service industry perspective. It doesn't matter which specific task you are performing. Each of those tasks are going to be mapped to activity to process to your process group. So this is the EPV, PPAT or GPAT, however you have this mapped in your head. But this is going to be the framework that you can follow, hopefully, to go deeper into your processes. But again, don't just start at the task level and don't go deeper from day one, because then you will feel that it is confusing and it might not be as useful. Okay, so again, you don't want to be too generic, too abstract, but you also don't want to be too detailed. Okay, so here, the process of process improvement. So what's a process? How do you do this, right? So number one, you need to identify some sort of KPIs. This is going to be at the enterprise level that you want to do. Once you have identified KPIs, then things are going to be easier. Generally, most companies struggle even with that. okay, then you have to map some sort of as is state. And this as is state, you start at the enterprise level and you go deeper into that. You don't want to start at the task or activity level. So you have to map the as is state, because that is going to serve as a language. Sometimes we hear in the community that they don't like to map as is a state. So everybody has different opinion in terms of how they want to approach. But generally, if you don't map the as is a state, you are not going to develop your internal taxonomy, and you are probably going to have very steep learning curve in understanding the to be state to be able to follow along to learn the to be state. So that's why as is a state, developing that language taxonomy is very, very, very important. And this is going to help you uncover some of those internal processes as well that you may not know, or you may not have. Then again, perform some sort of time studies. If you don't have time and dollar studies, then sometimes it becomes very noisy, and conversations may not go anywhere. So perform some sort of time studies, measure time of each of the activities. Again, hone in on one area and try to measure that. If you don't have that overhead measured, you don't know what to compare with. So measure that, and that will help you in understanding, okay, how much savings are you getting from these initiatives. Even if they might not be completely true, you want to do some sort of study. And then map to be state. So as a state and to be state both are going to be in compliant from their language, from taxonomy perspective. Hopefully they are coded very similarly. Again, the state is very different, but they are following very similar taxonomy and language. So they are hopefully comparable. So that's going to be the next thing. And then you need to build a consensus on both as is and to be. So this is going to be the process that you need to follow, depending upon whichever value streams you might be working with, but you need to do this. And then finally, you have to develop the enablement models. Enablement is going to be, are these technical processes, AI processes, physical processes? It doesn't matter. Okay, how are you going to enable them? What are your core KPIs, objectives? And those are going to help you in creating these enablement models. And once you uncover the constraints based on the enablement systems, you are probably going to rewire pretty much everything. Assess feasibility. And again, once you do the feasibility study, some of the assumptions that you had made initially, they might not make sense anymore. So you need to assess that and rewire everything. Go back to your EPB PPAT framework and rewire everything from the start, and see if that is making sense now from the feasibility study perspective. Then you have to measure the future state. And if you don't measure, again, you don't know, and you might not be able to build consensus. So do some sort of study, even if that might not be completely true. And then finally, compute ROI based on that. Some of the best practices, and I think we have already touched on a lot of that. So identify the target audience. Okay, that's very important. And process improvement initiatives are almost like marketing. If you don't have your audience defined, I don't know how to read the process documentation. So you need to define your persona. Or is persona going to be your technical vendors? Is it users? Some people argue that users, because users are the most important. But if you go back to the fundamentals of marketing, depending upon who is consuming the information, you will have to align it from their perspective. If there is going to be any sort of misalignment, you are probably going to run into issues. So sometimes you might have variants of different processes. From technical implementation perspective, the version could be very different from your user perspective. So define your target audience. Who's the target audience for you? Again, don't go deeper into the processes right away. Build some sort of outline. Otherwise, your heads are not going to work. This happens in writing, and this happens in process improvement as well. So develop your outline before you go deeper. And that's why your framework, the framework that we have provided, which is EPVPPAT, that will help you in doing that. Stick to outline and then go deeper into that. Take an iterative approach. Don't try to develop like 1 year worth of processes. It doesn't work, because the assumptions might change as you spend time. Technology may change, so your efforts might not be much meaningful. So take a real iterative approach. But iterative approach need to have legs and feasibility. You need to make sure that you are complying with the constraints. If you are not complying, then that effort is not going to go anywhere. Okay, as is process mapping is not optional. Some people believe that that's not optional. That's not true at all. Okay, you have to map, you have to document, because that's a language that you are trying to develop so that you can communicate with people. This is all part of change management training. So again, as is to be, both of them are not meant to be optional. Okay, focus more on intent and then tools. Sometimes we get customers. Okay, are you going to use visual? Are you going to use, I don't know, I mean, they might have 50 different tools. It doesn't matter which tool you use. You can design these processes on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter, guys. The intent is far more important than anything else. Focus on that. Okay, again, use time measurement studies. Otherwise, these conversations are simply noise. People will not be able to follow. You will struggle in developing consensus. Assess current skill set. Skill set is equally important in analyzing what may be feasible, from the feasibility study perspective. So analyze current skill set, because that will help you enable the enablement models. Okay, so what are the next steps? The next steps are going to be evaluate your current operational differentiators. Okay, in most cases, wherever you have the differentiator, that's where you have the process improvement opportunities as well. Okay, assess your organizational readiness for change. A skill set is as important as anything else that you have inside your organization. So make sure you assess that. Define core business objectives. If you don't have that, you are probably going to have problems. Okay, perform a structured process audit. If you don't have structured process for your audit, then also you are going to run into issues. So make sure you have that. And if you're looking for any sort of help, there are a lot of different companies that can help you with the business process advisory. So you can get that help as well if you want. And that's it for the webinar. I'm actually going to come back. I'm going to stop share. Shrestha, do you have any comments?
I think this webinar would be very helpful for many people out there, because we have constantly faced these questions. And just one question, like so when do you think a company should consider asking for outside help, if instead of doing these things internally? Because I feel like many clients that even come to us are also, after coming as well, they are confused that how this thing should be done. Should they go for outside help, or should they do part of the process internally?
So the reality is that obviously, when you talk about any sort of external help, there is a perception that external help is always going to be expensive, right? And that perception is very hard to change. And we have seen customers arguing that, okay, let's say you hire a company and they are going to do this. Maybe we can hire a BA and they can figure this out, right? Something like that, right? The challenge is that, I mean, if you are going to, we have our own business analyst in our own team, and we know that they can never do what we are able to do as a team, as a company, because we are crowdsourcing this knowledge. Because when you look at the business processes, you require very deep cross-functional knowledge spanning many different disciplines. You need very deep understanding of accounting, finance, supply chain, FP&A, so many different enterprise software categories. Now, nobody has all of that knowledge unless you are working as a group, as a team. So the biggest flag that you have, I guess, for your company, I mean, how much time have you spent? If you have spent, let's say, a year doing this with your internal resources, and you have not made much of the progress, then I don't know. I mean, that's a real waste of time and money. And that's where I guess if you hire a company, and even if they are going to act just as the advisor, even if you are going to utilize your internal resources for the actual work, that's okay. But I mean, depending upon how much time you have spent, what is the cost of that, and based on that, you need to analyze that maybe it's not something that we can handle, and maybe we need to ask for outside help. Yeah.
Yeah.
More questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay, perfect. So we don't have any other questions. So that's it for today's webinar. Hopefully you found this educational. Again, we meet for these webinars, at least 2 times a week. So we have many different flavors that we are attacking from this webinar perspective. If you want to know about them, the best place would be events and webinar page on elevateiq.com, or you can subscribe to our newsletter. On that note, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.